Hi, Sam from Guitar Village here, and today we are joined by Mark from Maton Guitars. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about Maton Guitars?
Sure. So Maton Guitars, they're an Australian company. We started in Melbourne in 1946 by a gentleman, Bill May. He was a musician and woodwork teacher. So post-war, essentially, he was, there was a huge shortage of instruments in Australia, and he started making guitars for his friends. I think the very first Maton he made for one of the guys in his band to perform on a radio show.
Oh, nice.
Seemed to work pretty well. Him and his brother started making guitars in the family shed, and that was just gone 75 years ago. So obviously the business has grown considerably since then. But it literally is the story of the guy starting a business in the backyard.
So in the early days then, I'm guessing they weren't producing that many guitars?
No, it was. It was absolutely a passion project for him and his brother, and obviously they had they knew what musicians needed because he was a player, and having the hard skills, I guess, working with wood and knowing how, having that kind of creative mind as well. It was just a perfect culmination of what you needed at that time to start a guitar company. So I'm not sure if anyone else was making guitars. I'm sure there were on small scale, but Maton certainly is one of the oldest Australian guitar companies still running today.
So one of the front runners really when it comes to Australian guitar production.
Definitely. One of the things that Bill pioneered in the early days was the use of native tone woods, and that at the time was probably out of necessity because of what was locally available. But everything from blackwood and bunya and all of those things came from him exploring those back in the 40s.
Very similar then to what the guitar builders in the US were doing. They were just using stuff that was in their backyard effectively.
Exactly, which as you know, that's all very kind of in vogue now to use local materials, but that's just been part of the company's DNA for 76 years now.
Wow. So in those 76 years, obviously, you've changed factories a few times, location.
Yep, we have.
How many guitars do you build a year at the moment?
So we like to try and stay on track for between 7,000 or 8,000.
Wow.
So some years it's a little bit less, depending on what we're making. And it has changed recently actually. Like with more of the high-end models, they take a bit more time, so the numbers may be a little bit reduced. But it's a considerable amount for a small family business. It's,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's still a decent. We've got 70 or so direct labour staff in the factory in Melbourne, and they're very busy.
Oh, fair enough. So how we get Maton guitars in all the time, and they are incredible. The consistency seems to be there every time. How do you keep up with that? With so many guitars going out?
Quality is incredibly important to us as a business, and it was certainly one of the founders' priorities. Was to make a great instrument. As a musician, like he wanted to see that, something that was usable and reliable. We've got a number of quality gates all the way through the factory. If you look inside any Maton guitar, you'll see there's a small sticker with initials running up and down it. So essentially what happens is as the guitar starts its life, it passes through that first section. The staff member who's responsible for working on it will initial it and then pass it forward. So if there's any quality issues, all of those people can pass it back up the line if there's anything that needs to be looked at and speak to the builder that works on it.
Yeah.
In addition to that, once the instrument's finished, there's a quality gate to make sure everything's okay. It goes up into setup, and then it sits in the factory for a number of days just to let it settle and let those timbers get used to being an instrument.
Is that at the point where it's strung up, pretty much ready to go out the door, and then it just sits there?
And then it sits, and then it goes back up into setup and is checked yet again.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So certainly with our local instruments, once it leaves the factory after having gone through all of that, stores can open a case and it's essentially ready to go. Especially with, like I said, our local guys who are only a little bit, maybe a 20-minute drive or something from the factory. Those guitars are ready to play when they leave.
So from the point where the tree is no longer a tree and it's now pieces of wood, to getting the guitar into the shops effectively, or into the player's hands, what's the biggest hurdle?
Look, those hurdles change. Supply chain's an issue. With the last couple of years of COVID, logistics have been a huge issue. Now, probably the biggest challenge we're facing is really just the demand. So I'm sure we're not the only ones, but the back orders are pretty substantial
Yes.
at the moment, and just managing the growth of the brand with, obviously, like, we can't just, because it's all the instruments are handmade, we rely on the knowledge of the builders, not really just, we can't turn up a machine, we can't turn it up to 11.
Yes, and you can't, I'm guessing, when you say because they're handmade, you have the choice of taking on more employees, but then you
Yeah.
have to train them and predict how long you're going to have the back orders for.
Exactly. I think look, we're the training and just getting the staff to a point where they can work on our guitars really is the biggest challenge at the moment. Obviously the interest is there, like it has. It's been wonderful that so many people are interested across the board in the music industry to pick up a guitar. But that training can take a number of months depending on the section that they're working in, and we need to ascertain the staff that come to us, how committed and how dedicated they are, and we've got people in that building who have been there for 20 plus years, 25 years.
Very experienced then.
So there's a pool of hugely experienced staff, and we're always looking for great people, to join the team, and I think the people that work there find it incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Working on those kind of instruments, and I send them pictures regularly from all parts of the world where the instruments that they've created in Australia, where they've ended up. So
that's incredible, because you ship worldwide effectively.
Yeah, we do. All corners of the world, from the west coast of America, everything in the middle, and China and Japan, and we export to all of those countries.
Yeah. Which out of the range, which model is the most popular?
Depending on the market. So in a lot of export markets, probably the Tommy Emmanuel's signature model, for good reason.
Yes, it's very popular here.
Yeah. So I mean, regardless of the player who it takes its namesake from, it's a great guitar. The 808s, which is our smaller body guitar that you've probably got a few of those in stock here across the range. They perform very well for us. The SRS do very well. Nashville's. So
yeah, brilliant.
Definitely something for everybody.
And actually, speaking of the Tommy signatures, you have quite a few artists on board.
We do.
How does an artist get endorsed by Maton? It must be quite an arduous process.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of time to get it through, I think. I mean, one of the things that we look out for is just, that's part of what my role at Maton, and we just look for great players and great people. So if those two things, that tends to help. It's different. I mean, we've got artists, virtuoso players like Tommy Emmanuel, to bands like The Offspring and Queens of the Stone Age and Crowded House. Like it really is a large, like a wide gamut of players that use our instruments for all walks of life, all types of music. But if they can, obviously we look for the talent, but just great people to work with as well.
So yeah, you got to be a great guy, a great player, and interesting.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, fair enough. Can you tell us about any news or anything that's coming up in the pipeline that's not top secret?
Yeah.
Or if it is, you can share it. We won't tell anyone.
Yeah, it's always top secret. Any news? We've got some. What can I say? We've got some big news for a small Maton. So,
okay. What's that going to be?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the interview.
Problem.
And
thank you for having me.
No problem at all.